Welcome back, dear listeners. Until now, we've traveled through the shadows of crime and mystery, walking beside the great Sherlock Holmes, solving cases, chasing truth. But today we take a different path, not one of puzzles or criminals, but one that leads us straight to the heart. Because sometimes, the greatest mysteries aren't found in the fog of London streets, but in the quiet corners of love, sacrifice, and human emotion. Before we begin our story, let's meet the man who wrote it. He was born William Sidney Porter in 1862, but the world knows him as O. Henry. Life wasn't kind to him. He worked many jobs and even served time in prison. But within those walls, he discovered his true gift, storytelling. Under the name O. Henry, he began writing tales about everyday people, ordinary lives with extraordinary emotions. And among all his stories, The Gift of the Magi, written in 1905, stands as his most cherished. He wrote it during a time of deep personal hardship, lonely, struggling with poverty. Maybe that's why the story feels so painfully real, because it came from a place of truth. Over the years, this short and simple tale has touched millions. It reminds us that love isn't measured by how much we have, but by how much we're willing to give. That the truest gifts come from the heart. So today, let us leave behind the world of logic and deduction and step into a quiet little room on a cold Christmas Eve where a young couple is about to show us what love truly means. And now, dear listener, let the story begin. $1.87. That was all she had. 60 cents of it was in pennies, painstakingly saved, one or two at a time, from stubborn bargaining with the grocer, the vegetable seller, and the butcher. Bargaining that left her cheeks burning with silent shame. Della had counted it 3 times. $1.87. And tomorrow would be Christmas. There was nothing more to do but collapse onto the worn-out little couch and cry. And that's exactly what she did. And from that moment we're reminded, life, after all, is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles taking the lead. While she gradually moved from sobs to soft sniffles, let's glance around their humble home. An $8 a week furnished flat. It wasn't exactly hopeless, but it certainly left the word poor standing by, ready to be called in. Downstairs, the mailbox never saw a letter, and the electric doorbell hadn't worked in ages. The name on the card read, Mr. James Dillingham Young, a name once grand, back when he earned $30 a week. Now, with just $20, they considered trimming it down to a plain D. But whenever Jim came home, Della greeted him with joy, calling him Jim, wrapping him in the kind of hug that made all worries fade. That's love. After she wiped away her tears, Della stood by the window and looked out at a gray cat walking along a gray fence in a gray backyard. Christmas Day was only hours away, and she had just $1.87 to buy a gift for Jim. She had spent months saving every penny she could, but with expenses always higher than expected, $20 a week didn't stretch far. She wanted to get Jim something truly special, something fine, rare, and worthy of him. Her eyes drifted toward the pier glass between the windows. You know the kind, those tall, narrow mirrors in cheap apartments where only the thinnest can get a full look by shifting side to side. Della, being slender, had become an expert. Suddenly, she turned from the window and faced the mirror. Her eyes sparkled, but her face had turned pale. In a swift motion, she let down her hair, letting it fall freely. There were 2 prized possessions in the Young household: Jim's gold pocket watch, a family heirloom, and Della's rich, flowing hair. If the Queen of Sheba had lived nearby, Della would have flaunted her hair just to outshine the Queen's jewels. If King Solomon had been the janitor, Jim would have proudly pulled out his watch every time just to see him turn green with envy. Now, as her beautiful brown hair tumbled past her knees, nearly forming a garment, she paused for a moment. A few quiet tears fell on the worn red carpet. Then she gathered her courage, tied up her hair, threw on her old brown jacket and hat, and hurried out the door, skirts fluttering. The sparkle hadn't left her eyes. She stopped at a sign that read, Madame Sofronie, hair goods of all kinds. Rushing up the stairs, she caught her breath. Madame Sofronie, pale and cold-looking, didn't quite live up to her name. Della asked if she would buy her hair. Madame barely looked before lifting the mass of brown waves with expert hands and offering $20. Without hesitation, Della agreed. And just like that, she was off. The next 2 hours flew by on the wings of hope and excitement. She searched every store, hunting for the perfect gift for Jim. At last, she found it. There was no doubt. It was meant for Jim, and Jim alone. No other store carried anything like it, and she had searched them all. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and elegant in design. Its worth reflected not in flashy decoration, but in its quiet substance, just like all truly valuable things. It was even worthy of the watch. The moment she saw it, she knew it belonged to Jim. Quiet strength and understated value. It described both the chain and the man she loved. She paid $21 for it and returned home with just 87 cents in her pocket. With that chain, Jim would never feel embarrassed checking the time, unlike before when he hid his cherished gold watch behind an old leather strap. Once home, her excitement gave way to more practical thoughts. She lit the gas lamp and took out her curling iron, trying to fix what love and sacrifice had done. Repairing such things is never easy. Dear listener, it takes more than hands. It takes courage. In 40 minutes, her head was covered with small, tight curls that made her look almost like a mischievous schoolboy. She studied herself in the mirror with a critical gaze. Quietly, she wondered how Jim would react. She hoped, no, she prayed, that he wouldn't hate the change. She whispered to herself, half joking, that he might mistake her for someone from a chorus line at Coney Island. Then her eyes softened. What else could she have done with just $1.87? She'd done her best for him. By 7 o'clock, the coffee was made, and the pan was ready on the stove. She held the chain tightly in her hand and sat near the door he always used. The moment she heard his familiar footsteps on the stairs, her face turned pale. And, as she often did before the small moments of life, she offered a silent prayer. Please, God, let him still think I'm pretty. Jim stepped through the door and closed it behind him. He looked thin, serious, just 22, yet already carrying the weight of a family. His overcoat was worn, and he had no gloves. He stopped just inside the door and stood there silently. He looked at Della, really looked, and something in his eyes unsettled her. It wasn't anger, nor shock, nor judgment. It was something else, something unreadable. He simply stared, and the silence stretched. Della, nervous, slid off the table and went to him, her voice trembling with emotion. She tried to explain everything. How she had sold her hair, how she couldn't bear the thought of Christmas without giving him a gift, how it would grow back, and how much she hoped he wouldn't mind. She smiled through it all, trying to lighten the moment, to bring him back to her, saying that she had something beautiful for him, something truly special. Jim's voice came slowly, like it had to travel through fog. He asked if she had really cut her hair. She confirmed it with quiet courage, telling him again that she had sold it, asking softly if he still saw her the same way. She was still her, just without the hair. He looked around the room, as if expecting to find the long brown waves lying somewhere nearby. She told him not to search. It was gone. It was Christmas Eve, after all, and she had given it up for him. And then, with a sudden, sweet seriousness in her voice, she said that maybe the hairs on her head were numbered, but no one could ever count the depth of her love for him. And with that, she quietly asked, "Shall I put the chops on, Jim?" Suddenly, Jim seemed to wake from his trance. Without a word, he wrapped Della in his arms. And for a moment, dear listener, let us respectfully look away, perhaps at some simple, quiet corner of the room. $8 a week or $1 million a year. Does it really matter? A mathematician might say yes. A clever man might offer a witty reply, but neither would be right. The Magi once brought gifts, precious ones, but this was something different. We'll understand that soon enough. Jim reached into his overcoat pocket and placed a small package on the table. He reassured her gently, not to worry. No haircut, no change in appearance could ever change how he felt about her. But, he added, she'd understand his strange reaction if she just opened the package. With quick, eager fingers, she unwrapped it. First, a joyful gasp. Then suddenly, tears, overwhelming and uncontrollable. Jim held her close. There they were, the combs. The very set Della had adored for months, displayed in that bright Broadway window. Beautiful combs of pure tortoise shell, edged with tiny jewels. Just the right match for her once long, flowing hair. She had dreamed of owning them, never imagining it could come true. And now, they were hers. But the hair they were meant for was gone. Still, she held them close to her chest and, through teary eyes, managed a soft smile. She reminded him with gentle hope that her hair grew quickly. Then, suddenly, a spark returned to her face. She jumped up with childlike excitement. Jim hadn't yet seen his gift. She held it out on her palm, her eyes shining. The platinum chain glowed faintly, as if it carried a piece of her spirit. She told him how she had searched everywhere for it. And now, with this chain, he'd be checking the time 100 times a day. She reached out. Let me see it on your watch. But Jim didn't move. Instead, he sank back on the couch, folded his arms behind his head, and smiled. Quietly, lovingly, he told her the truth. He had sold his watch to buy her the combs. And so, he suggested gently, maybe they should put their Christmas gifts away for now. They were far too special to be used today. And then he said, simply, now, how about those chops? The Magi, as you may know, were wise men, very wise, who brought meaningful gifts to a child in a manger. They gave birth to the tradition of Christmas giving, and surely their gifts were thoughtful, perhaps even returnable, just in case. And now, I've just shared with you the simple story of two foolish young souls living in a modest flat. Two people who gave up their most treasured possessions for love. But listen closely. Of all who give and receive gifts, none are wiser than they, for they gave from the heart. And so, they're the true Magi. On a quiet Christmas Eve, inside a tiny, humble flat, two hearts made the greatest sacrifice, not for praise, not for anything in return, but simply out of deep, selfless love. Della and Jim had almost nothing, and yet they gave everything. In a world that often confuses price with value, they remind us, love is not found in things, but in the sacrifice, in the thought, in the giving of one's heart. If this story touched you, even in the smallest way, we invite you to carry that feeling forward. Love deeply, give kindly, and remember, the simplest gifts are often the most priceless. Thank you for spending your time with us here at Echoes of Stories, where every tale is told not just with voice, but with heart. If you felt something today, help us keep these echoes alive. Like, share, subscribe, and let others hear the warmth too. Your support means the world to us. We'll see you again soon. Until then, take care of yourself and of those you love.